Chapter 4. I will explain to you what this is all about, said Grandfather, and then you can decide what to do, Ellen. I hear a lot of talk among the British officers in my shop. I hear a lot in the tavern, too. I have information that must get to General Washington by tomorrow night at the latest. It must get there without fail. That's why I have hidden it in a loaf of bread. The bread won't attract attention, and it can be passed from one messenger to another until it gets to headquarters. With a frown on her face, Mother jumped up from her chair and stood in front of him. How could a message be that important now? She protested. It's only 2 weeks until Christmas, and the officers are planning to stop the war for Christmas. I know they are. Grandfather scowled at her. And how could you know that? Pray tell. Why, said Mother, people all over New York are having parties and balls for the officers. I hear that hundreds of fruitcakes have been made already, and thousands of candles. That's what I heard when I went to the candle shop. Grandfather shook his head. His face, usually so pink-cheeked and jollied, looked gray and drawn. And General Howe loves parties, Mother pressed on, eagerly. They all love parties. I know there won't be any fighting at Christmas time. Grandfather's eyes were grim. Nevertheless, this message is very important. Our army has been defeated time and time again for months. He pulled his foot from the pot of water and sat up. Why, he exclaimed, the British brought 30,000 men, 3 times as many as Washington's had. He swung his leg over the side of the couch, as if in his eagerness to do something for Washington's army, he was ready to start. Whatever information we patriots here in New York can send him about the British is important. The only way we can win is by using surprise and cunning and determination. He started to get up, but his foot touched the floor and he groaned and fell back on the couch. He looked at Ellen intently. Can you understand what I have been telling you? I think so. Ellen could see that Grandfather was very serious about the need to send his message. She too had been worried about all the news of lost battles and retreats, especially since Ezra was with that army. She remembered how joyous everyone had been last July when they heard about the Declaration of Independence. There had been bonfires on the village green, and singing and dancing in the streets, and then the British army came to New York, and there had been 3 months of defeat. If you understand how important it is to take the message, Ellen, I'll tell you how it can be done, and then you can decide. Ellen listened and didn't say a word. You walk down the docks near the market house and get on a farmer's boat or an oysterman's. They come over early every morning and they go back to Elizabethtown at 11 o'clock. Elizabeth is a very small town. When you get off the boat, you'll find the Jolly Fox Tavern without any trouble. My good friend, Mr. Shannon, runs the tavern, and you give the loaf of bread to him. That's all there is for you to do, Ellen. The Shannons will welcome you and take good care of you. Sailing across the bay didn't seem so hard. It was finding a boat here in New York and asking a stranger for a ride that worried her. How could I find the right boat to take me? She asked. She didn't intend to go, but she thought she'd ask anyway. The docks are right near Front Street, where we walked on Sunday afternoon. The farmers and the oystermen tie up their boats near the market house. They are friendly people, and they often take passengers to Elizabethtown since the ferry boat stopped running. I'll give you money to pay. And how would I get home again if I should decide to go? She said in a very low voice. Oh, the Shannons will put you on a boat early in the morning. You'll be back here by 10 o'clock. Does Mr. Shannon take the bread to General Washington? She asked. No. He takes it to a courier who will ride part of the way. Then he'll give it to another courier who will ride through the night with it. And finally a third man will carry it to the general in Pennsylvania. Ellen thought about the messengers riding alone through the countryside to carry the secret message. She wondered how it felt to be all alone among the British soldiers. Mother interrupted. It's too much to ask of her, Father. She's only 10. Her father reached out and squeezed her hand. Abby, dear, he said, I know you are distressed because of all that has happened this fall, but don't make the child timid. We all have to learn to do things that seem hard at first. A child can't start too early to learn that. Ellen knew her grandfather wouldn't send her if he thought she couldn't do it. Now that she thought it over and she knew if she walked carefully, she could remember the way to Front Street, and she would have money to pay for the boat. She had liked sailing across the East River when she and Mother had taken the ferry boat from Brooklyn to New York last November. Perhaps it wouldn't be too hard. But what would I do if I get lost? If you lose your way, just speak up and ask someone for directions, said Grandfather. You're sure there's no one else to take it for you, Grandfather? With this bad ankle, I can't walk around New York to find one of my friends, and I wouldn't know where to send you or your mother to look. Besides, there isn't time. I need your help, Ellen. Ellen was quiet for a long time. Very well, she said finally. I'll do it, if you're really sure I can. I know you can, Ellen. And Abby, he said, this is nothing too hard for a child of 10. The Shannons will take good care of her, you may be sure of that. In that chest in the kitchen are clothes that Ezra left here years ago. Go out and see what you find, Ellen. Now that she had decided to go, Ellen ran quickly to the kitchen and poked around among the blankets and old clothes in the chest that sat near the fireplace. She was eager to see what was there. Here's the striped cap, she exclaimed. And here's that old blue jacket with the holes on the elbows. I remember these brass buttons. Grandfather had bought Ezra all new clothes when he had come to New York to visit several years ago. Ellen put on a red knitted shirt that was too small and the blue wool jacket that was too big. The brass buttons made her think of Ezra's grin. She put on heavy gray stockings before she pulled up the short breeches. The leather breeches were so old and stiff they could almost stand alone. She kicked up her legs to make them soften up. Not since she was a small child had she known what fun it was to kick her legs as high as she could. She tried to kick the skillet that hung beside the fireplace. These will be better for walking than petticoats, she said, as she pranced around the kitchen. Why can't girls wear these too? Ellen Tolliver, said her mother primly. It would be unseemly. After trying on Ezra's boots, which were too big for her, she decided she would wear her own leather shoes to make walking easier. Certainly it would be easier to jump out of the way of horses and wheelbarrows, and it would be better for climbing on the boat. She ran into the shop to show her grandfather how she looked. For the first time since he fell on the ice. Grandfather laughed. Ha! You look like a ragged little urchin, all right, he said, with those holes in your elbows. But all the better. No one will even notice you. And now we must cut your hair. Mother picked up the scissors and stroked Ellen's long brown hair. Couldn't we just tuck her hair under the cap? She asked. No, Ellen said firmly. I must forget and take it off. That would be dreadful. Besides, it might look bunchy beneath a cap. Better to have it short and not worry about it. She remembered her friend Lucinda, who had short hair with a band of ribbon around her head. Lucinda looked very pretty with short hair. Cut it off, she said impatiently. Grandfather smiled from his couch. You'll do right well, Ellen, he said. Tie a pigtail in back with a cord, and then just snip off the part that is too long. Ellen could feel her mother's hands tremble as she tied back the hair and snipped at the long pigtail. It will grow back, Ellen said to her. How do I look? Jumping up from the chair, she stepped over the hair on the floor and stared at herself in the mirror. Why, I favor my father with my hair tied back, she exclaimed. Her brown eyes were just like her father's eyes, although not stern like his. Her face was thin like his, too. She stared at herself. Suddenly, the person staring back at her didn't look like Ellen Tolliver, and for a minute it frightened her to look so changed. Glancing sideways, she could see her grandfather smiling, his old, cheerful smile. Mother had given him the loaf of bread, which she was wrapping in a blue kerchief and tying with a good strong knot. Where shall I hide the bread? Ellen asked him. Don't hide it, he told her. Don't think of hiding it. Just go along swinging this blue bundle as if it were nothing at all. There's only one thing to be careful about, Ellen. Be sure you give the bread to no one but Mr. Shannon." His eyes grew as hard as they had been earlier that morning when she surprised him in the kitchen. "No one but Mr. Shannon. He and I might hang if we were caught." "Hang?" cried Ellen. "You mean on a gallows tree?" Ellen's hands trembled so that she could hardly button the brass buttons on her jacket. No one had mentioned hanging before. If she had known her grandfather might hang, she never would have agreed to do it. It wasn't fair. She gulped, and at last the words came out. I can't do it, grandfather. I just can't. I'm too scared, and I might make a mistake." "You can do it, Ellen, better than anyone else. No one in the world will suspect a loaf of bread in the hands of a child. If, perchance, someone found the message in the bread, just act surprised and say you don't know a thing about it." He smiled at her to encourage her. "Just hang on to the bread good and tight until you see Mr. Shannon. That won't be hard to do, now will it?" "But don't talk to any strangers, Ellie," Mother pleaded. "Now, Abby, she has common sense." "You're sure I won't make a mistake, grandfather?" "I can't see where you could go wrong, Ellen. The boatmen are kindly and they take people every day. And at the other end of the trip are my good friends, the Shannons." "Well then," she said, "I think I'm all ready now." "Good!" cried Grandfather. "When you hand the bread to Mr. Shannon, say this to him: 'I have brought you a present for your birthday.' He will understand what it means." Mother slipped 2 corn cakes into her pocket. "You'll get hungry before you get there, I'm sure." She was trying hard to sound cheerful. "I've always heard about Mistress Shannon good pot pies, and now you can eat one." Grandfather slipped some coins into her pocket. Then he squeezed her hand until it hurt. "God bless you, Ellen. I'm proud of you." Mother pulled the red and white striped cap down around her ears and gave her a pair of mittens as well as a hug that almost smothered her. Then she stepped to the door and opened it. "I think you are a brave girl, Ellen." Ellen stood at the top of the steps and looked up and down the street. She took a deep breath. Mother had said she was brave, and Grandfather had said he was proud of her. Well, she hoped they were right.